Well, hello again and welcome back to the streets of Gosforth. Now, I've come to a slightly different location this time. I was going to do it in the house because it's a little bit blustery again. But you know, what you realise doing these videos is that when I first set out embarking on them, I thought it would be about, you know, my erudite reflections and my updates on football. But no, a lot of the comments I get are from expats in particular who like to point out that was where they used to play as a little boy, or that's where my teacher used to live, in that house on the corner. So I've got to understand, you know, I've got to meet the man and I've got to listen to the audience, and yeah, the travel log element of it is as much of an appeal as anything I say about football, which I'm okay with. That's all right. So yeah, rather than stick to the street where I've done these the past few weeks, I thought I would come to the drive today. Now this is even more upmarket, you know, partly motivated by the fact that it is very quiet. It's a very nice street, but also, you know, down the years it's been home to various Newcastle United footballers going back as far as the 50s and 60s. This part of town was always popular, and at the closer to the top, I think a few of them still do live as well. So yeah, we might even get an unexpected guest appearance today, much like Dan Byrne a couple of weeks ago in town. So yeah, I've just come out. It's Friday afternoon. Now I would have brought you this video sooner, but my wife sent me to the shops to buy gravy bones and bin liners. I don't think any house can exist really, you know, society really would fall down without gravy bones for a dog and bin liners when you've got three little kids. So yeah, I apologise for the delay, but without further ado, I've just come out of, well, a couple of hours ago, come out of Eddie Howe's press conference, and it was an interesting one. There was a hell of a lot to unpick, which I'm going to try and have to work my way through, and to give you a little insight behind the curtain. You know, at the end of it, us journalists, the North East reporters, we get together and you say, what was the best line, what you're going to do it on, what do you think was interesting? And there was a hell of a lot today. Now I'm going to start with, and there's a lot more to come to, I'm going to start with the story I wrote straight away, immediately after the press conference, and that was Eddie's quotes on Ryan Fraser. Now, it is absolutely unprecedented for Eddie to say anything other than about any of his players, I love them. You know, the guy who hasn't kicked the ball for 6 months and who clearly isn't probably good enough for where Newcastle want to go. Love his attitude, and that's good, that's right, that's commendable, and it's the reason he has fostered such a brilliant team spirit, and everyone is part of that journey as to where it's taken Newcastle during the past 14 months under Eddie. Today was different. It was a story I wrote 10 days ago on the eve of the Carabao Cup final that Eddie had sent Ryan Fraser. I was going to say Ryan Taylor there. That would be a story. He'd sent Ryan Fraser to train with the under-21s. Now, Eddie wouldn't have done that. This is the guy who gives second chances, third chances. He'll always give his player the benefit of the doubt. So for him to send Ryan Fraser down to the academy, which for those who don't know is a different base, different site, yeah, was significant. From then to be asked about it today and say that on the record publicly he only wants players who are, you know, quote, committed to Newcastle around his squad, I thought was really strong, and it's the first time he's really done that. He was then asked, does Ryan Fraser have a future at the club? He wouldn't close the door on that definitively, and I understand why, but at the same time he said no, probably not. So I'd imagine that's the last we've seen of Ryan Fraser in a Newcastle shirt, and you would now fully expect him to be sold in the summer. Which brings us on to the second story I wrote immediately after the press conference, and that was Eddie's quotes on the need to invest to go to the next level. Now I wrote a story on Monday, the day after the cup final defeat, and I said that this was the end of almost the first chapter, a brilliant first chapter for Newcastle United, but Sunday almost felt like a little bit of closure really, and it was a signpost as to a change of direction which is needed, that ultimately, and I've made this point, you know, it comes back to players for so long can outperform the sum of their parts, and it is to Newcastle and Eddie's enormous credit that for the entirety of 2022 they did that. But Sunday, for me, was a reminder as to why you need better pedigree. You know, you need a Casemiro in the middle there, a Varane type at the back, a Martin. That was put to Eddie today, and it was something he didn't deny. In fact, he said he understood the concept of that. It was put to him, you know, Amanda Staveley's comments with regards to, she went on the radio earlier in the week, didn't she? And she was quite bold. Yes, we will win the Champions League, we will win the Premier League, the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. Now, Eddie smiled when that was put to him, and I know why he did, and he was keen to say, you know, while he welcomes Amanda's ambition and intent, it's important to keep a lid on expectations, especially in the short term, because of course in turn that puts pressure back on Eddie. But the key thing he said, and this was a question I asked of him, I said, you know, to bridge that gap, to go to the next level, ultimately it comes back to money. And Eddie, as I expected, said, well, I don't want to sit here and say yes, absolutely categorically, because then that denies something which he's a firm believer in, and that is the improvement of players. And has any manager in the country improved individuals more than Eddie Howe over the course of the last 14 months? No. So he will continue to do that and continue to try to get the best from what he's got. But, and he said also, you know, to go to the next level, I think the phrase he used was to disturb the very top teams, you've got to invest. And you just looked at Newcastle on Sunday, didn't you? And for me, it was just, it was so obvious that this cycle, and we go back to that, you know, the cycle has come to an end, and it's time now to look at what Newcastle can do to go to the next level, and that will come back to players, to better players, to a deeper squad, allied to Eddie's excellent coaching. Now, something which as well, which I feel sort of quite strongly about, was another question I asked of him, is the form and the fitness or otherwise of Callum Wilson. Now, Eddie was diplomatic, the right word, I don't know, but he said, you know, Callum has had moments since the World Cup. He's had good moments first half against West Ham, for example, but he did not deny my suggestion that Callum Wilson is struggling and is, you know, for me, he's way off. And I thought he wasn't, just so far removed from the player. And he set such high standards. You know, we've got to remember, this isn't a criticism. He's a victim of his own success in a way that, in fact, he has been so good and so integral to Newcastle. But what we're seeing right now is undeniably a player who's nowhere near that level. And for me, I just feel as if Newcastle are carrying him right now, which brings me on to the point I want to make, that it's time for Alexander Isak to come into the team. And that is not me saying Alexander Isak is so much better. Isn't it ludicrous that Wilson's been in the team in front of him? It's not, because I've been honest about this before. I don't think Isak himself has been really tearing up trees, especially not when he started. But what I think is important, and I apply this to Anthony Gordon as well, Newcastle have got 15 games now to do two things. One, to make sure they achieve European football between now and the end of the season. To not finish this campaign in the European places, I think would be so disappointing and so unjust on the excellent season that they've had to date. But I also think they've got to work out what Isak and Gordon are going to bring them or not going to bring them, and that will inform them what they do in the summer. They've spent £100 million on these two players, don't forget. Gordon, of course, mitigation, he's only just come in, and Eddie, interestingly today, did say that Anthony Gordon arrived not at peak level fitness, so okay, you understand why he hasn't been used so far. Isak as well, he said, is still a little way short of absolute maximum, but I think you've got to start to play him now and pick how you want to use him. What have we seen so far from Isak? Substitute starter, left wing, right wing, number 10 striker. They paid £63 million for this guy, a club record. Why did you sign him? Where do you want to use him? Okay, 15 games now. Let's see it. Let's see what he's got. It's not as if the opportunity cost of that is taking a fit and firing Callum Wilson out of the team. It's not. So for me, I think Isak has got to start playing games in the position where they bought him for, whatever that may be. And Anthony Gordon as well, you know, because that will then inform what they do and what they need in the summer. Because at the moment, summer investment, it's looking like to bridge that gap, a left back, two midfielders, and arguably across every front three position potentially, given that they've only scored they haven't scored more than once in the game in the Premier League since Boxing Day. Those players have gone cold up top. And would you say they've gone cold, or have they just, some of them, reverted to perhaps what they are capable of on a regular, consistent basis? So I still think there is an awful lot of work to be done with the squad if they are to go to the places where Amanda Staveley wants to take them. And while the past 18 months has been incredible, awesome to witness under Eddie Howe, it is the time now to give him a little bit more in terms of what he's going to be working with going forward. But before all of that, you know, that is a consideration for down the line. That's perhaps longer term. For now, as I've just said before, there they've got a few months to, and I'm reluctant to use the phrase save the season, but they've got to. That's what they've got to do. The form has been, it's important to remember they've only lost once, you know, the game against Liverpool since August. But, you know, you can't get away from the fact that the form has fallen away, and if they continue on the trajectory they probably are going to fall outside the European places, which, as I said, would be a massive disappointment. So I asked the question of Eddie as well today. You're probably thinking, did anyone else get a chance to ask a question? It was only 3 I asked, and I've sought to mention each one of them on this video. But I said, you know, I said, it's a simple question, but it might require a complex answer. Why has the form gone from there to there? And Eddie said that he wanted to be honest, and basically he thinks that in the key moments in both boxes they've come up short, and he said he didn't want to make that about the strikers, the forward players, he said, because yes, the goals have dried up, but at the same time they've started conceding goals they wouldn't have done previously, and he's right. Set piece at West Ham, he referenced a set piece at Bournemouth, he referenced Manchester United's first goal on Sunday, he referenced that. So Eddie clearly sees work to be done in holes at both ends of the park, and I would go along with that, because as I said, after the game on Sunday, Newcastle aren't playing badly. You wouldn't look at them and say there's a team who turned up at Wembley and disgraced themselves. It's just they've lost their confidence and they've lost their sharpness where it matters most, in front of the opposition goal and in front of their own goals. So yeah, work to be done. And well, if you're going to come back to any game, Manchester City probably isn't the game you want to be going into. It's not going to be easy for Newcastle now, because they've set such a high bar, higher than what, on the whole, generally, if you average it out, what these players are probably capable of. They put the bar beyond that there is now a level of expectation that they will just go back to that. And Eddie said, once you go so far on that journey, it's really not easy. It really is a huge challenge for them now as to how they do find the next level. They go down to Manchester City, and if you're pushing me for any sort of prediction, well, I just think the emotional and physical toll of the last week, I can't see anything other than a home win, really. It's probably, you're probably looking at Wolves a week on Sundays, to the point where Newcastle really are going to have to try and resurrect the season from that point onwards. I'm just going to pause here for a second, actually, because there's some work going on up ahead then, sound quality, all the rest of it. And yeah, one other item I've got to address from today is, of course, we saw the headlines emerge earlier in the week concerning PIF and Newcastle and separation, and would the Premier League revisit the takeover of Newcastle. Now for me, and I'll try to be honest here, I always thought this idea of separation was a little bit of a smokescreen. It was never really about that. What the takeover was about, and this was on the front page of the Daily Mail at the time, was above that. It was geopolitics. It was the Saudi government to the UK government, which in turn went on to the Premier League, and I think that ultimately is had a large say in why the takeover did go through. Separation, now for me, the PIF, the Saudi state, now we've got to be careful not to confuse separation and state run. There is no separation. I'm trying to be brutally honest. We knew that Yasser Al Rumayyan is attached to the Saudi state. The chairman of the PIF Public Investment Fund is Mohammed bin Salman, the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia. So there never really was separation, but separation is different from state run. And I think that is what Newcastle were trying to reassure the Premier League, that the decisions would be taken independent of the states. It would be a PIF / Amanda Staveley, Murdoch, Ducey, Reuben brothers. They would be the guys who are running the club. So I don't expect the Premier League to revisit the legalities of the takeover. Eddie was asked about that today, and as he said on previous occasions, there is a degree of sympathy here that he is the only man who's put up to talk about this. It should be other people who are answering questions on this. Eddie did say that he doesn't have any concerns, hasn't sought reassurance from the owners, was aware of the headlines, but there wasn't really a great deal he could say about it. So thank you again for watching, guys. Click on the links. Please click as well. I'm reminded to do this all the time. Click like, because it helps with the algorithm. Whatever that is, I don't know, but it's important. Click like, subscribe, and I'll see you again next week. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.